Live. Okay,
There we
now
go.
we're
There we go. There
live.
we go.
I'm glad all that weird stuff didn't get here. Now
Press
we
the
are
box
live.
in two.
All right, just let me check on my
Let's
phone.
go,
Oh,
bro.
there we
Okay,
go.
I think I'm ready now. I think I'm ready now. All
All
right.
right, cool.
Here we
Perfect.
go.
Perfect. All right, welcome guys.
What
This is
up?
Will with the Counter Docs. I'd like to welcome to both my guests here, Trevor, who's a Roman Catholic, and on the bottom there we have sort of Truth Apologetics, Christopher Lockwood.
Uh,
This is not Dr. Christopher Lockwood, the Orthodox theologian. This is my friend who's an evangelical Christian. Now, today we're talking about the topic of the Gospels. So, whether the Gospels are written or who wrote the Gospels, right?
so basically, the question
So,
is
real quick,
traditional authorship? Yeah.
yeah. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it to you guys. This is not your opening statement, okay?
Okay.
I want you guys to tell the audience why you're here, since I believe you're attacking the position, right, Chris?
I'm affirming the position that the Gospels were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the traditional authorship, or by their associates.
Okay, so take 1 minute, tell the audience why'd you challenge Trevor? Go.
Okay. Yeah. So me and Trevor, actually, he's a friend of mine. Fellow Christian brother. We're in rooms together and we debate all the time. I mean, we debate probably every day. And so basically, I noticed that Trevor tends to take the traditional authorship. He doesn't believe the Bible was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He doesn't believe the Bible, like the Torah was written by Moses. And he tends to take the views of a lot of the atheistic scholars of today, what they would call scholarship, but what I would say they're presuppositioning their atheistic position scholars. So I don't have too much respect for those type of scholars, and I'd like to debate any and all of them. I don't think they stick to the historical method on these things. I think they have bias themselves. They would say us religious people have bias. I would say that that's totally wrong. Truth should be tested, and I'm willing to sit here and run the historical method with Trevor here and show him that the case for the traditional authorship is much stronger than what these atheistic scholars say. So we've been going out a little bit in the rooms, and I wanted to get him public here. And let's have it out. Let's have a good debate and see who's got the most evidence on their side.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I'm going to run down the debate format we're going to do tonight. It's kind of similar to an Oxford, traditional Oxford style. So we're going to give 10 minutes opening to both of you. Obviously, the attacking side is going to go first. With that, we'll have our first rebuttal, which is 7 minutes each. Whoever wants to go first, and then we got cross-examination, which is 10 minutes each on both sides. And then we'll do, after that, I will ask questions and based on the things that the guests have said, okay, for around 10 minutes. Then they each get 5 minutes closing. And after that, we have Q&A. So please, obviously, no profanities, no name callings. Let's not do that. And
There he
we're
is.
doing
All right,
historical
Trevor.
methods
What's
only.
up?
So meaning we need direct quotes, okay? Primary source. There's no, he said this, they said that. If you guys do need something to be pulled up on the screen, let me know. I'll give you permission to share your screen. Um, here, what's going on? Can they see the chat? Yes, they can see the chat if they're watching, guys. All right. With that said, you are the affirming side, Chris, right?
Yep. Yep.
Actually, if you have questions for Chris, please type in the chat QC and then your question for Chris. Okay. I will not read anything that is not written as a question. I'm not reading any statements. Okay. I'm not reading anything that's offensive. If you have a question for Trevor, QT, and then your question, you got a question for both of them, QB. All right. With that said, let me share the app here. Okay, so we got timer. You can look at my screen. You should have the timer. Let me share it with both of you. All right, so your 10 minutes, you don't have to use it. Let me know if you need to yell it. Starts now.
All right, moderator, thank you. And thank you to my opponent, Trevor. Thanks for showing up. Tonight's resolution, okay, is not whether Christianity is true, inspired, or divinely authoritative. The question before us is a historical one. Were the canonical gospels written by the traditional authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or their direct associates. This is a question of authorship, not theology. Now, let me begin by agreeing with something my opponent has already emphasized, Trevor. External tradition must be distinguished from internal claims. This is what he said in the chat. That is correct analytically, but distinction does not mean isolation, and it certainly does not mean dismissal, okay? So in ancient historiography, authorship is established by a convergence of evidence, not just one thing or another thing. And I think in these chat rooms, we think that we know the historical method, but let's see what the historical method actually says. Okay, we go by external attestation, which they're very strong on that, internal coherence, early reception, and explanatory power compared to rival hypotheses. This is not a Christian method. This is the method used for Tacitus, Josephus, Thucydides, and Xenophon. Okay, these are all historians that use this. All right, so if we change the rules only when the Gospels enter the room, we are no longer doing history. All right, we are doing special pleading. Okay, we're changing the rules for the Gospels. All right, now what I'm not claiming, all right, let's just, get that out of the way. I'm not claiming that the Gospels identify themselves by name in a modern title page sense. Most history actually that has, authorship, doesn't actually name itself in the title page. So that's already a fallacy. I'm not attesting that early Christians believed authorship based on blind faith, or that tradition alone settles the question. What I am claiming is this: the traditional attributions of the Gospels are the best historical explanation for the data that we have, all right? Now, external evidence is early, uniform, and uncontested, okay? Let's begin with the external tradition because all ancient authorship relies on it. From our earliest manuscript evidence onward, we find the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel according to Mark, the Gospel according to Luke, and the Gospel according to John. These titles are uniform. They are geographically widespread. They are uncontested by alternative attributions. This is historically significant. I mean, it almost doesn't get any better than that. If these works were originally anonymous and later attributed, we would expect competing names. We would expect regional variations and attributions to more prestigious figures than a tax collector, a fisherman, so we find none of that. Instead, we find attribution to, like I said, a tax collector, a non-apostle companion of Peter, a Gentile physician, okay, and a fisherman from Galilee. That is not how legendary attribution normally works, okay? Patristic testimony is not late guesswork either, all right? My opponent's probably going to try to argue that it is. Early Christian writers do not speculate about gospel authorship. They just report it, okay? That's what the evidence shows. They distinguish what was written, who wrote it, and how it was received. They do this before the canon is fixed, before imperial Christianity, and before centralized control could enforce uniformity. You may challenge their reliability, but you cannot dismiss them categorically without rejecting nearly all ancient historical attribution. Okay, and the internal evidence, there's coherence, not self-authentication, doesn't need it. Now, internal evidence does not authenticate itself, and no serious historian claims that it does. What it does is test fit. When we examine the Gospels internally, we find accurate first century Palestinian geography. We find correct temple customs prior to 70 AD. This is all historically significant. Semitic linguistic interferences in the Greek. Eyewitness style details, including embarrassment and restraint. Consistency with known historical events and cultural practices. Internal coherence does not prove authorship, but incoherence would falsify it. And here, coherence consistently supports early eyewitness linked composition. So the burden is on the alternative hypothesis, okay? The burden is on Trevor today. If the traditional authors did not write the Gospels, then he has to beat me, he's got to pose an alternative explanation, which must account for 5 things. Trevor's got to account for 5 things. He's got to account for the early and unanimous attribution. He's also got to account for the absence of rival author names. He's got to tell me why accurate historical and cultural detail were throughout the Gospels, rapid and widespread circulation under those names, and acceptance across hostile and distant communities, okay? There was no debate on the names. So an anonymous community model must explain why anonymity left no trace and why false attribution succeeded everywhere immediately and without dispute. Okay, what would falsify my position? Okay, let me be clear about falsifiability. My position would be weakened if we had early manuscripts with competing gospel titles, early writers explicitly denying known authorship, internal evidence pointing decisively to late foreign composition. We have none of that, people. So in conclusion, distinguishing external tradition from internal claims is good scholarship. Separating them to dismiss converging evidence is not. The traditional authorship of the Gospels is not a theological assumption. It is the best historical explanation for the totality of the evidence, okay? And how much time do I have? 4 minutes? All right, so I'm just gonna go over some patristic gospel authorship here. You know, the church fathers and you know what they said. All right, so it's going to kind of give some credence to what I just said. Okay, so Matthew, you know, we had Papias of Hierapopolis, AD 110 to 130. You know, he said Matthew compiled the Logia in the Hebrew dialect, and each interpreted them as he was able. Okay, that was fragments preserved in Eusebius. All right, key points there. Matthew was an eyewitness apostle, originally composed in Hebrew Aramaic, very early testimony. Okay, Irenaeus of Lyons attributed to Matthew 180. Okay, Mark, again, Papias of Hierapolis. Mark, having become the interpreter of Peter, wrote down accurately whatever he remembered. Key points. Mark, you know, is Peter's interpreter, not an eyewitness, but apostolic authority via Peter. It's a secondary eyewitness that counts in history, and accuracy is emphasized. Irenaeus of Lyons, you know, after the departure of Peter and Paul, Mark the disciple, an interpreter of Peter, also handed down to us in writing what he had been preached by Peter. Okay, Luke, Irenaeus of Lyons again. Luke, also the companion of Paul, recorded in a book, the gospel preached by him. You know, Luke was Paul's traveling companion here based on this testimony. Medical doctor, gospel reflects apostolic preaching. Okay, Origin of Alexandria, AD 230. The third gospel is that, according to Luke, praised by Paul. We don't see any competing attributions. So I don't know where anybody gets it, actually, to be honest. I mean, the evidence is clear. Irenaeus of Lyons, John the disciple of the Lord, who also leaned upon his breast, himself published the gospel while he was residing at Ephesus. Critical fact, Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp, and Polycarp was a direct disciple of John. That's a one-generation chain. Okay, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Clement of Alexandria, John wrote last, aware of other gospels, to give a spiritual gospel. Okay, so I've got, you know, much more, but now let's go to some internal evidence here. All right. So, Gospel of Matthew, he's a tax collector. Okay, his internal indicators are he's of, you know, financial precision. Matthew consistently uses exact monetary terms and records financial details others gloss over. Okay, that shows a tax collector. Self-efficating inclusion. Only Matthew explicitly calls Matthew the tax collector, an embarrassing label, which that's the you know, that's the law of embarrassment, which is most likely to be true because you're not going to put embarrassing details in anything. Classic eyewitness humility, all right? And it has a Semitic structure to it. Heavy use of Hebrew parallelism and fulfillment formulas, consistent with the Jewish insider writing to the Jews. This matters. It's a later anonymous forger would remove the shameful label, smooth financial details. Matthew doesn't either. You know, Gospel of Mark. You know, the interpreter of Peter, internal indicators, Peter-centric narrative. Peter appears more than any other disciple. Okay, there's embarrassing honesty about Peter. He was rebuked by Jesus, you know, told to get behind me, Satan. Denial seen as brutal and unsanitized. Vivid eyewitness detail. Aramaic phrases preserved. Okay, exact times, gestures, and emotions. Okay, and the fingerprint, Mark reads like preached testimony, not literary invention. Fast-paced, oral, raw. That's exactly what you'd expect from Peter's preaching recorded by Mark. You know, Gospel of Luke, you know, he's a formal historiography prologue. Claims, investigation, eyewitness sources, orderly account. He's got medical vocabulary in there. There's a lot of we in there. Why this matters, Luke explicitly tells you he isn't inventing, he isn't anonymous, he interviewed eyewitnesses. Okay, that's ancient historical method, not mythology, okay? And finally, the Gospel of John, explicit eyewitness claim, he said it himself. Okay, so there's your internal claim right there. And he's got the beloved disciple motive present at Last Supper, at the cross, and at the empty tomb. So, you know, look, I don't know where Trevor's going to go to try to say that these are falsely attributed or you know, anonymous, but you know, that's my start. Let's see what he's got.
All right, perfect. Right on time. All right, Trevor, your 10 minutes. You don't have to use it all. Just let me know when you're done, if you yield your time. All right, go.
Well, thank you for having us on here. The claim on the table is not a devotional. It is not theological. It's not a referendum on whether the Gospels are sacred, meaningful, inspired, or authoritative for believers. Those are different questions. Tonight's claims are historical, that the canonical Gospels was written by the named figures, mainly direct literary composition of the Greek text we possess. And in history, real history, claims stand or fall on evidence, not reverence, not familiarity, not what everyone later came to repeat. So before anything else, here's one question that controls everything we do tonight. Whether the evidence that is specific individuals actually wrote the text, the Greek text we possess. Not later belief, not later labels, not later consensus, evidence of authorship. Notice something, when a historical claim is easy to prove, you don't have to argue around it. You prove it to the text and it tells you. Paul does this. Ancient authors do this. Prefaces, self-identification, subscriptions. I wrote this, I witnessed this, I X. But when you open the canonical Gospels, we hit a fact that is not emotional, not theological, and not controversial as an observation. The Gospels do not name their authors in their narratives. They are third-party works. They do not claim to be eyewitnesses because they're not eyewitnesses. They do not claim John does not say, I'm John testify this. They do not sign the document inside the story the way authors do. So whatever you believe about the truth or the holiness of the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not coming from inside the works themselves. The names come from outside the narratives, from reception, from tradition, and from later identification, from titles and transmission. And that brings in the distinction that you must keep clear. Reception history is not composition history. Attribution is not authorship. A label is not a signature. It is the basic historical method. It is the difference between saying, this is what communities later believed called the book. This is who demonstratedly composed the book. First, Luke is the only gospel that opens it with a formal preface in historiographical style. That is the moment you would expect an author to anchor its identity, especially if the identity is part of the authoritative claim. And what happens? The author speaks in the first person, the only part of where he speaks in first person in the whole Gospels. About method, earlier accounts of compiling order, yet still refuses to name himself. That does not prove Luke is false, it proves something narrowly. The Gospel's literary posture is not signed memoir, it is composed narrative. It reads like an educated author composing sources and tradition into finished Greek prose for readers. Second, the synoptic relationship, Matthew and Luke stand in clear literary relation with Mark. Whatever detailed model you prefer, the model survives any serious model. These are the text built from text, shaped editorially, arranged, expanded, compressed, reframed. That's how this is not a moral criticism. That's how ancient writing works. But it creates a problem from the simplistic story that Chris wants to sell, because he wants 4 distinct autographs, 4 independent compositions that we actually see in composition process. Sources use tradition shaped, redaction visible. Third, Matthew's audience design. Matthew repeatedly preserves semantic phrases and translates them wrongly, because he's writing to people that are outsiders of the group. That is primarily not an argument that about what Mark primarily did or did not do or did not know. It is an argument about what the author expects from the audience. Translating implies reading who needs the translation. Explaining implies reading who need explanation, and is outward facing Greek readers, outsiders, people whom Semitic expressions are not automatic. That profile fits naturally with tradition moving across language and culture into Greek narrative form for expanding communities. It fits less naturally with the claim that the text is straightforwardly an autobiographical memoir that announces itself as such. Fourth, the titles, according to Matthew, or kata in Greek, is a preposition where it doesn't have to mean written by. It's just according to. They tell you what later communities called the text when copying and circulating them. But that is exactly what they are: paratext, headings, labels, identifiers attached in transmission. And here's the line that ends confusion. A title can identify a book, a title cannot by itself prove who wrote in the first edition. So, but the early church said, Papias said, Irenaeus said, we will deal with that carefully tonight, not by snaring at tradition, but by placing it in the category, correct category. Early testimony, which can be important, can be even right, but it remains eternally testimony after the fact. It does not relate eternal anonymity. It does not automatically settle what exactly is referred to, especially when early remarks can be about sayings and recollections, interpretations and preachings rather than the finished Greek narratives as we have them. So my argument is not everything is uncertain, therefore nothing can be known. My argument is sharper. The resolution is too strong for this evidence. You can reasonably say that you have the text in early meaningful attributions in reception. You can argue that they preserve apostolic tradition. You cannot argue that they connect to apostolic circles. Those are different claims. But if you want to say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John demonstrably composed these Greek texts, you owe this room evidence proportionate to their claim. Eternal self-identification, contribution. If you want what later attribution, however early, however widespread, then you are not proving authorship, you are proving reception. Reception is not composition, attribution is not authorship, a label is not a signature. That is the burden, that is the line, and that is where this debate will stay. Thank you.
Alrighty, we'll call that done early. Okay, great, guys. Again, now we're going to go into our rebuttal section. So the rebuttal section, the two will not interact, but we'll start with Chris. You will be providing evidence to respond to Trevor's argument. Again, historical methods, primary sources only, and then we'll give it to Trevor.
Okay.
With that said, you have 7 minutes for the first rebuttal. And for the folks in the chat, if you have questions you want me to read during Q&A for Trevor, please put QT and then question. If you got a question for Chris, QC and then question for both, QB. And please structure your questions like questions. I will not read any statements or anything that's disrespectful. With that said, Chris, whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer.
All right, I'm ready. So Trevor did exactly what I thought he was going to do, and it's a fallacy. I mean, his whole argument was that they didn't no internal self-identification. Okay, that's a flaw. That's somebody that doesn't understand history or how history is put together. Okay, there's plenty of historical works that don't have internal self-identification. So I mean, if that's your argument, then you lose, right? I mean, and again, I said that he needed to provide a better alternative for who authored the Gospels than the one that we have presently. And I ask anybody out there, did he do it? Of course not, because there's not one out there. So what they try to do is they try to say, well, he didn't say he authored the book, therefore he didn't author the book. And then he also said something like, later tradition doesn't prove authorship, but it's part of the historical method. Okay, there's the historical method has steps to it. And, you basically take the evidence and then you go by the steps and then you see what the best evidence is. So we're going to start this by saying, anonymity does not mean unknown authorship, and it never has. We've heard repeatedly that the Gospels are anonymous. That is true in a narrow technical sense. They do not contain modern style author signatures, but they don't need them. But in ancient historiography, that is the norm, not the exception, actually. So that's normal. That's what most historical documents have, okay? Most ancient works, including Tacitus, Xenophon, and others, do not say internally, I, X, wrote this work. So again, I like Trevor. He's a great guy. He's a really good guy. I don't think he understands the historical method. I don't think he does, because that argument against the Gospels is going to fail, and it fails right here. Historians do not treat them as anonymous in any meaningful sense. So this is special pleading. What Trevor's doing is he's special pleading. He's saying that, you know, all of the other history, we don't have to use these rules, but in the Gospels, we're going to use these rules. It doesn't work like that, okay? Remember, this is the historical method we're using here. So the real question is not, do the Gospels name themselves internally? The real question is, how do historians normally determine authorship in antiquity? I got to repeat that again. The real question is, how do historians normally determine authorship in antiquity? Okay, we need to educate the audience too. The answer is external attestation combined with internal fits. Okay, not one, not the other. That is exactly the kind of evidence my opponent is asking us to dismiss. So basically what he's saying is he's asking you to dismiss the historical method, which we use on every other historical document, okay? And then, you know, I want to say that, you know, what he's doing is he's proving skepticism. I'm skeptical that they wrote that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels. Skepticism is not an alternative explanation. Remember, I said he had to have an alternative explanation better than mine. He didn't even have one. So he didn't even have an alternative explanation. So my opponent has raised doubts about tradition, about bias, about internal indicators, but doubt alone is not a historical model, okay? That's not how the historical method works. To overturn a traditional attribution, one must offer a better explanation that counts for the same data. So far, we have not been given a clear timeline for when names were attached. We have not been given a mechanism for how attribution occurred. We have not been given an explanation for why attribution was unanimous, right? Nobody challenged it. Or a reason rival attributions never existed. Okay, in history, this is a home run. This is a grand slam. This is a close the door, shut the door on it. Saying we can't be sure does not explain anything, all right? An external tradition is historical data, all right? Not special pleading. So he said, you know, this tradition, you know, get rid of it. They don't know because they weren't there. Again, that's somebody that doesn't understand the historical method, all right? We've also been told that external tradition is late, biased, or circular, but every ancient author we know depends on external testimony. Okay, this is how all history literally works. If external attestation is dismissed because it comes from people who cared about the text, then no ancient history survived scrutiny. Okay, we wouldn't have any. The correct historical move is not dismissal, it is evaluation, all right? And what we find with the Gospels is early attribution. Okay, I proved that. Geographic spread, consistency across communities, absence of competing claims. That pattern is historically significant, whether one likes the conclusion or not. Okay, and its uniform manuscript titles are not explained by the opponent. This is a critical omission, okay? If the Gospels circulated anonymously for decades and were later attributed, we should expect exactly what we see in other falsely attributed works: competing names, regional variations, confusion. Instead, we see none of that. We see uniform titles. Nobody argues the titles. From our earliest manuscript evidence, thank God for manuscript evidence, I believe that proves that. The fact has not been explained. It has, in fact, been avoided by Trevor, okay? And how much time I got? 2 minutes? Internal evidence is not self-authenticating and never has it claimed to be. So a real historian won't say that. My opponent suggested that internal evidence cannot establish authorship. That's a misunderstanding of how historians use internal data. Internal evidence is not used to prove authorship in isolation. It is used to test whether an attribution fits. And here, the fit is strong. Correct first century geography, accurate temple practices, cultural details that disappear after 70 AD, narrative restraint and embarrassment. Again, the embarrassment details, you know, show the authenticity of this. Internal coherence does not prove authorship, but incoherence would falsify it. So, but you know, we don't have that. We have a coherent reading here. The core issue is method consistency, all right? At this point, the debate is no longer about evidence. It is about standards. If we apply one method to the Gospels and another to the Greek and Roman text, then the conclusion is decided in advance. But if we apply the same historical criteria, that's all I'm asking, the same historical criteria, then the traditional authorship of the Gospels remains not only plausible, but explanatory and the best explanation with the evidence that we have, which is all history is anyways. So to summarize, anonymity is normal in ancient literature. External tradition is how authorship is known. Okay, that's normal. Internal coherence supports, not undermines attribution. No superior alternative explanation has been offered. Raising doubts is easy. You can raise doubts about anything. Explaining data is harder. At this stage, the traditional authorship of the Gospels still explains more evidence with fewer assumptions than any competing model presented, because he has not presented one. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. With that said, Trevor, on your first word, I'm going to start the 7-minute timer. You are to provide historical evidence to counter Chris's points.
Well, can I ask something real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's your time, so.
I think that you're the one that's claiming that there was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So shouldn't you be the one that has to bear the burden of proof to do that?
No. The burden of proof is on you, because all the evidence shows
I'm not claiming it though.
Okay, so here's the deal. Chris just spent the past 7 minutes trying to justify through historical method that he can show the if I get this correctly, you're saying, Chris, that through the consistency of the Gospels and also the internal evidence that supports the consistency, that it is safe to say that the authors of the Gospel are who they say they were.
Yeah, and if I could real quick, since you asked me the question, the historical method applied shows that these Gospels were authored by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I actually am proving it, because I'm using the historical method, the same historical method used on any other historical document, and all the evidence points to that it's written by those people. So again, Trevor, I don't think he understands the historical method here.
So, right. So I mean, from me listening to it, I think you did provide evidence to for your argument. So Trevor, are you ready to give counter arguments to his evidence?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Whenever you're ready.
The tradition is early and unanimous. Early and unanimous can be true as receptive history. It has not become proof of direct composition. Consensus is a sociological fact. Authorship is a compositional claim. Second, the titles say, according to Matthew, titles matter as labels. They are not signatures. According to tells you how a text was identified in circulation. It does not place a pen in anyone's hand. If they want headings to function like audiographs, they must show that those headings are authorial claims inside the narrative, not paratext attached in copying culture. They cannot. No competing names exist. That is not proof of correctness. It is evidence of constellation. Once a label becomes a standard in copying and public reading, rival labels die in transmission. No rival survived tells you a tradition stabilized. It does not tell you who wrote it in the first place. Papias proves it. Papias is precisely where their case gets fragile, because even if you grant him maximum goodwill, he is not holding to a standard autograph of the finished Greek gospel text. He is a later voice reporting origin stories, and his descriptions are not as clean as the slogans. They are reading a later report, and it cancels internal anonymity and compositional footprints. Papias was known to be someone with a. Eusebius said that he was like a moron, really, and he didn't know what he's talking about, and that's the only claim.
Catholic. Go ahead.
What?
Sorry, go ahead. I said Catholic just said that, but go ahead.
That's what Eusebius said.
Okay, good. No, go ahead.
He said that he has a Hebrew gospel of Matthew, but it was a sayings gospel, so it's not a gospel. And he said that and he said he had a Matthew. I mean, Mark was Peter's interpreter, but that's not a gospel either. That was a saying source. That would be a logia. It's not a gospel. And if you look at the canonical Greek gospel of Matthew, it doesn't show any translations from Hebrew to Greek. So I don't know what Papias was talking about. He also recorded something, a death of Judas. Judas, he recorded another death of Judas, saying he was swelled up as big as a house. So I don't know what Papias was talking about. Irenaeus proves it. Irenaeus is a major witness to reception history, especially the stabilization of the fourfold gospel in the late 2nd century. That matters, but is not contemporaneous proof of composition. It is not eternal self-identification. It is not a signature. It is later ecclesiastical identification. Eyewitnesses detail proves eyewitness authorship. Detail is not identity. Ancient biography can be vivid without being written by eyewitnesses. Traditions can be concrete without being autographs. A skilled narrator can produce realism without the named person. They want you confused. This sounds real, but this sounds who wrote it. That is not method. That is impression management. Why would they pick Mark and Luke, not apostles, if it was true? That is a psychological storytelling. It argues plausibility, not proof. Plausible is not proven. And it actually goes the other way. Naming a text after an apostolic associate is exactly how reception anchors authority without guaranteeing audiograph authorship. That is reception logic, not conversational demonstration. Now, notice what they did not do. They did not solve internal anonymity. They did not solve Luke's anonymous compiler posture. They did not solve literary dependence and redaction. They did not turn paratext into signature. They did not produce complementary composition of evidence. They tried to overwhelm you with inherent certainty. It's always been called like this, so it must be like this. But here's the ruthless reality. If your claim requires an audience to treat labels as audiographs, you don't have an authorship place. You have a naming tradition. And I'm not asking you to just respect the naming tradition. I'm asking you not to confuse it with demonstrated authorship. So the burden is exactly where it was. If you want to win the debate about authorship, you must produce evidence or authorship, not generalized apostolic connection, not early reception, not theological authority. Until you do, the resolution remains a claim stronger than what their evidence can carry. That is why their case sounds so strong to people who want certainty but collapses under historical standards. And back to the manuscripts, the earliest manuscripts like P1 and P4, they didn't have titles to them at first. So the oldest manuscripts, they didn't have titles. I'm done.
Cool. All right. So thank you guys for the presentation of your evidences. Now we're going to go into the cross-examination, which you two will officially start to interact with each other. We are going to start with Chris. You are going to question Trevor, okay, on the claims he had made. Trevor, you are to answer the questions yes or no, if possible, and I will stop all sorts of filibustering. So try to keep the answers short and try to keep the questions precise. We got this, guys?
Got it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. All right. So when on your first word, I'm going to start the timer. Also, again, I just saw a bunch of new people join. Please get your questions in the chat. Let me know who you're asking. Excuse me. Who your questions towards, and I will ask them during the Q&A. With that said, Chris, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. So, Trevor, you said a lot right there. Can you clearly state the historical method you are using to evaluate authorship tonight?
Oh, yes or no question.
You don't want to answer. No,
it doesn't have to be yes or no. I mean, it doesn't have to be yes or no.
So this is an open-ended question. There's an open-ended question. So can you clear, because this is going to show that, well, anyways, can you clearly state the historical method you are using to evaluate authorship tonight?
I'm going to the oldest sources that we have. And the oldest sources are the Gospels. And since there's no naming in those Gospels, then we would go to the second oldest, which would be Clement. And he don't name anybody that's part of the, he cites what they said, but he didn't say who said it. Like and Justin Martyr, he just leaves it to Memoirs of the Apostles.
Okay, it's not a filibuster, but okay. So you don't have a historical method from which you're using to evaluate authorship tonight, then?
What do you mean?
Well, so do you know what the historical method is?
Can you tell me what it is?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second here. I should get a little more time, so I have to explain to the guy what the historical method is. 1 second here. All right. It's what I've been using all night on you. Okay. Historical method, okay, uses primary sources as one method, okay, early attestation, internal textual evidence, external corroboration, linguistic and cultural context. This is how all history is attributed, okay? Let me get back to my questions here. And so you don't have a historical method by which you're judging the Gospels, do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and can you share that with me? What is it?
I use the earliest accounts that we have, like the Gospels. Then I would use what the earliest sources will be.
So what's the earliest? You said the earliest. Explain what the earliest is. What do you mean the earliest Gospels?
The Gospels themselves.
So the Gospels themselves. Okay, you're gonna have to be a little more specific. Sorry. So you're saying that the earliest Gospels don't attribute Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
No, they do not.
Okay, and can you explain what those are?
What do you mean? Like,
I mean, you said that the earliest Gospels don't attribute Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Where do they claim that?
Say again?
Where do they claim that they're the authors of it in the text?
Okay, I use the historical method. Again, I'm using the historical method to evaluate whether they did author the text. Internal authorship, as I've shown, isn't actually most historical documents don't have the historical method, but no problem.
Which ones?
Oh, yeah, you want to go through them? Sure, no problem.
Please.
Well, actually, it's my question and answer time. You can ask me during your question and answer time. Which ones? Now, let me ask you, the same method you're using for the Gospels, is that the same method you use for non-Christian Greco-Roman texts?
Yes, it would.
Okay, all right. But you don't have a historical method. I just had to explain it to you, didn't I? Okay.
Because I didn't know what your definition of it was.
Well, you're not defining it either. I mean, you're just using one thing. You're using the internal, the internal method, which I've shown that the historical method doesn't need. I mean, I've got 5 other things. You've shown no evidence at all.
The strongest one would be the earliest Gospels themselves, right? That would be the strongest one.
Now, does your method allow external attestation to establish authorship for any ancient text?
Yes, it does.
Okay, but so again, I'm going to ask you the question again. Does your method allow external attestation to establish authorship for any ancient text?
Yes, it does.
Okay, but here you want to throw it away, though, right?
Because they're too late.
They're too late? So what do you mean by too late? What do you mean by too late?
Years.
Over 100 years? So you're saying that 100 years is too late for that to apply?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we have Alexander the Great. We don't have anything for 300 years.
People wrote when he was alive. People traveled.
You don't have anything for 300 years. From the time he was born to the earliest writings, 300-year gap that people are talking about Alexander the Great. Okay, but again, no problem. Okay, is it correct that most ancient works do not contain modern style author signatures? You want me to repeat the question?
What's your question?
Is it correct that most ancient works do not contain modern style author signatures?
Yes, they claim to be the author in the text, like Paul does.
Okay, that you're using what you're cherry picking, you're using one. So you're saying that most ancient works do use modern style author signatures. Can you name any others?
Well, just name one, Paul.
Can you name any others?
He's got 7 epistles.
Can you name any others?
How many more do you want me to name?
Can you name any others? I guess that's a no. Okay. All right. So you don't really know, do you? You don't know history, do you, Trevor, really? You haven't really looked into this, have you? You don't have to answer. Do historians normally treat such works as anonymous in the sense of unknown authorship?
What is it?
Do historians normally treat such works as anonymous in the sense of unknown authorship?
What do you mean by that?
So I'm asking you if historians normally treat such works, you know, that they'd say are anonymous in the sense of unknown authorship.
It's like if they didn't claim to be authored, if the text is anonymous when it itself, it would be anonymous.
Okay, just make sure to ask me in our question answer to tell you which historical works do not have internal authorship. Please ask me that question so I can bury you. Can you name one ancient historical work whose authorship is established without external testimony? I'm going to repeat the question.
Yeah.
Can you name one historical work whose authorship is established without external testimony?
Tell me.
Pardon?
Tell me.
You're the one that's saying that you know that these aren't written by the authors. I'm trying to tell you that. Okay. Do we rely on external attribution for Tacitus, Xenophon, and Josephus? Do we rely on external attribution for Tacitus, Xenophon, or Josephus?
I think they claim to be the authors within the text.
They don't. They don't claim. Okay. All right. Are you aware of any early gospel manuscripts that attribute the same gospel to different authors?
Why would that matter?
Because you're providing, I'll answer you, because you're providing no alternative method. See, the burden of proof, the burden of proof is on you to give us an alternative method. Doubt doesn't win the day for you. Just, I mean, anybody can plant seeds of doubt. That's not how the historical method works. Okay.
I'm saying
just by saying, what's that?
I'm saying that they're anonymous.
Say again.
I'm saying that they are anonymous.
You're saying that they're anonymous based on what? You're not providing a alternative method of why they're anonymous, or, you know, pretty much anything down the historical method line. All you're doing is saying, I doubt this because this, I doubt this because of that. That's not how history works. Okay, if the gospel is circulated anonymously for decades, why do we have no rival author attributions, not even incorrect ones?
Because they was established early.
Okay, so you admit then, okay, everybody listen to that. He admits that the authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were established early. That's early attribution. That's a point for me. Thank you, Trevor.
Not really early though, like 100 years.
That's pretty early.
But Papias didn't know what he was talking about when he's talking about Matthew and Mark.
Well, you don't know more than Papias, man. You don't know more than Papias. I don't know why you think you do. You don't.
I don't know. He's considered a moron.
Papias?
Yes.
You know, whether he's a moron or not, he's giving us external attribution, which we don't even need Papias. I mean, I don't even need Papias. I've got so many other ones. But you understand that all the evidence. Now, would you agree that at least all the evidence points to the gospel authors being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
No.
Okay. All right. What historical mechanism explains unanimous attribution across geographically independent communities?
What do you mean?
Last question again. I can't, you know, be the teacher. You know, this is too big of a debate. What historical mechanism explains unanimous attribution across geographically independent communities?
I'm saying, why would that matter? They got to test it within 100 years. So why would it matter if they're unanimous? Unanimous is true.
Yeah, this is the hardest question for you to answer. That's why I'm not going to help you with it. Okay. Now, what is your positive alternative model for gospel authorship? Not doubts, but an explanation, because that's what history is, right? We got to get the facts. We got to explain it. So what is your I
don't think we have enough facts to be able to tell who wrote them.
Okay. And you're coming to that conclusion how?
All right, last question. Answer that real quick, Trevor, before we go to yours.
Because we don't have enough evidence, because the Gospels don't claim to be, and we don't hear anything until Papias, and Papias is obviously wrong about Matthew and Mark, and it don't come till another 50 years until Irenaeus, and Irenaeus wasn't there. Irenaeus wasn't taught by John.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Am I able to ask just one more?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What evidence, if discovered, would cause you to accept traditional gospel authorship? What's the falsifiability with you? What evidence if
a manuscript saying that that an apostle wrote them?
okay. Okay, well, we have that. So
No, we
okay,
do not.
manuscript.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right,
right.
Trevor. So he did ask one extra question. I'm going to give you 10 minutes and 30 seconds. Whenever you're ready, man, on your first word, I'm going to start the timer.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Do any of the authors claim to be the authors? Like, do Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John claim to be the authors within the text?
As I said, I don't need it.
Why don't you need it?
Because the historical method doesn't require me to need it, because because if I needed it, then I'd have to throw out about 70% of other history that we've done. You just don't need it. This is the flaw in your whole argument, which I've shown you in the rooms here, everywhere. I mean, how many times do I need to tell you? Well, keep asking. Ask me which histories don't have internal authorship.
So in Luke's preface, does the author name himself?
We don't need it. Again, we keep repeating ourselves. We don't need it.
So they're anonymous, like within themselves. The texts are anonymously written.
No, they're authored by these authors. You don't need internal evidence. You're taking one of the 5 things that require the historical proof, and you're just running with it. And you're just saying, I doubt it because they don't have this. That's not proof that they're not authors. They are the authors because all the evidence says that they're the authors. This is how history works. And you'd have to tell me then you don't believe Tacitus, you don't believe Josephus, you don't believe Plutarch, you don't believe Suetonius. They don't have internal authorship claim. So you don't believe those guys?
Do Matthew and Luke use Mark as their source?
There's no evidence of that. I mean,
Yes,
what does that? What does that have to do with whether Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote it?
90% of Mark is in Matthew.
Okay, well, they're both eyewitnesses. So if I have 2 eyewitness accounts of who shot who, okay, you can look at both of them and say 90% are right. Okay, why aren't they 100%? Because they're actual real eyewitnesses. That actually backs up eyewitness testimony right there. Actually, if you look at real eyewitness testimony, which I've studied through law, you'll see that they're not going to be 100%, because that would be forgery. So these look like real eyewitness accounts. So that actually works for me, not against me.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, but you don't even know the historical method. So what do you know? No offense, but like, what do you know? I mean, I don't even know what method you're using to come to your conclusions. So I don't think you have one, to be honest with you.
So at least 2 of the Gospels are texts built using prior to the text, right?
No, wrong. Absolutely wrong. Yeah, you're building assumption after assumption after assumption after assumption. No, it's a house of cards. You have a house of cards. No.
So what direct evidence do you have that the 4 direct autographs are named individuals rather than literary products shaped through sources and redaction?
I have external evidence. I got the church fathers. I have internal coherence.
The church fathers are not reliable in that.
The church fathers are not reliable? Says who?
Not in this. Not in this.
Says who? Says who? Says you? I mean, what's your evidence for that? You don't have any evidence. You said that because it was 100 years after. Look,
our memories do not work that way. Do you think we can remember stuff that's going to come from 100 years from now?
That's not how the historical method works, my friend. Oh man. So let's just throw all history out then. Let's just throw all history out because, let's throw out Alexander the Great never existed then, according to you. Alexander the Great never existed.
We have more evidence for Alexander the Great than we ever will have for Jesus.
Oh.
We have coins from him.
You're an idiot for saying that. You're an idiot for saying that. I mean, that was a stupid, sorry, but that was a stupid statement. Do you want to debate that? You want to debate what evidence we have more of Alexander the Great or Jesus?
Chris, excuse me, Chris. Again, sorry. This is.
I got you.
This is Trevor's questioning, so
I got you.
Trevor, go ahead with your question. I apologize.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he said that. He said something stupid. So more evidence that Alexander the Great than Jesus. I have eyewitnesses 15 years within Jesus. We don't have 300 years within Alexander the Great. Give me a break.
That's not true.
Go ahead.
That's not true. We have complementary people that walk beside him that would write stuff down, but it got copied by somebody else.
Oh, so you believe that, but you don't believe in the Gospels. I think you have something against the Bible. You're showing a lot of bias, Trevor. You have no standards. You have no historical method. You understand? Mine's historical. Mine's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see how that looks. Yours is just like all over.
Keep performing confidence.
Pardon?
I said keep performing confidence.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, Trevor, just keep your question like yes or no answers.
None of his was though.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just suggesting it so we
got
can
nothing.
keep moving.
He's
You
got
can
nothing.
get him to
He's got
answer more questions. But yeah, go ahead. Whatever you want, whatever you like to do.
What year did Papias write?
Papias wrote. 1 second. Let me look it up.
120.
It was 120. Yeah, it was right around 120, I believe. Yeah.
So how many years had passed since the writing of the gospel to them?
Probably about. Well, it depends on which gospel you're talking about.
Well, I mean, each gospel shows that the destruction of Jerusalem happened, though, don't it? So at least 70 AD.
Yeah, so let's say, I mean, whatever you want to go with, I'll go with, because again, this evidence you're presenting actually works for me, and we can discuss it, in our closing statements. Everything you're saying actually in a historical method works for me, not against me. I know you think 100 years is a long time, or 50 years, or 20 years. It's not. It's actually really, really good, and it works really well.
It's really not. It's really not.
Okay, but you're not using the evidence to say that, but okay, keep going. Keep asking your questions.
What year did Irenaeus write in?
Irenaeus wrote in, I think it was 2 something.
180.
180, okay.
So, Papias claimed that we had a Hebrew gospel. Is the canonical Greek gospel, is that in Greek or is that in Hebrew?
Okay, you're using your absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of that didn't happen, basically. So you're using the fallacy of silence here. Just because we didn't find it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's a fallacy.
It shows that it wasn't written in Hebrew though, because Matthew used the Septuagint for the virgin prophecy.
Sure. No. They're definitely written Greek, but there's a lot of people that believe that there's a Hebrew Matthew somewhere. I mean, this is first century stuff.
Somebody believes that doesn't make it true. That would be a completely different gospel.
Right. No, it wouldn't be a completely different gospel, it's just different language. But no, what I'm trying to say is just because something hasn't been found yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's a fallacy of silence. Just because there's no Hebrew gospel to be found yet doesn't mean it won't be found later. So, I mean, yeah, that the historians don't look at that as a reason to dog Irenaeus in any way.
We have a lot of manuscripts of Matthew, and none of them was written in Hebrew. The canonical gospel that you have in your Bible was written in Greek, not Hebrew. So Papias was obviously wrong.
That's not obviously wrong. No, that's not how history works. Again, this is not how history works. Somebody can say something, from the 1st or 2nd century. We weren't there. Okay. So shame on us for thinking we know more than they did.
Papias wasn't there either.
Yeah, but he was there closer than you were, wasn't he?
I mean, sure.
Okay. Who are we going to believe just in a vacuum? You or Papias, the church father? So, somebody that has.
Let Trevor ask the questions.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, no, I apologize. Go ahead, Trevor. I mean, none of this stuff proves it, but okay.
In John 21, it is the beloved disciple referred to in the 3rd person rather than I, John. Yes or no?
Referred to in the 3rd person?
Yeah.
It's honestly irrelevant. You can have 3rd person. That doesn't mean that he didn't author it.
He said, we know that his testimony is true. So obviously that it's becoming a we now. It's becoming a community thing at that point.
I mean, I can show you historical documents where people go in the 3rd person and they still are attributed to it.
In the sentence where they do that, where like that.
Sure. I'm going to say his name wrong. Thucydides' work, History of the Peloponnesian War, 5th century BC. he regularly refers to himself in the third person. So that didn't work, did
I
it?
think it would be a false equivalency.
Pardon me?
I think that would be a false equivalency.
Why is that a false equivalency? Well, I mean, you're the one
That
asking the
doesn't
question,
matter. That doesn't matter.
but you just said that because it's in the third person, you're trying to say that he isn't the author. But I've shown you another historical work where the third person and he is the author. So what are your standards here, Trevor? I'm
If you look at the
trying to
Greek
understand
text,
what your method is.
if you look at the Greek text of John 21, it's completely different than from the rest of the gospel itself.
Okay, that's a you're making a vague statement. I mean, what does that have to do with anything?
It shows that it wasn't written by John at one point. It shows that it come from more people.
Why?
Because obviously, if the style is different, then obviously then he didn't write it.
What do you mean by style? Define your terms.
John 21 appears to be it was written by someone else at a later time.
And what makes you say that?
Because if you look at John 20, it ends in a perfect way.
What's that perfect way?
He says that this was written to make you believe. Just pull it up. It's in John 20, the last verse in John 20.
You're the one making the statement. These are very vague. You know, I don't even know how that would falsify gospel authorship.
It's doubt. It's like it's provoking enough doubt to.
Doubt doesn't win your case, man. I said that in the opening. Doubt does not win your case. Okay, I just made the audience doubt. I just made the audience doubt that you know the historical method. Okay, doubt, I mean, anybody can make anybody doubt. Okay, I want evidence. I want clear evidence of the historical method.
Obviously, you don't want evidence because you take stuff that wasn't even in the gospel itself, and you just say we think that he wrote it, so he must have wrote it.
That's not true. That's not what the historical method teaches. Okay, I have a method you don't, Trevor.
That's what you think.
It's obvious. I asked you during my question that you didn't have any type of method. You didn't even know what the historical method was. I don't think you're really qualified to speak on it.
That is time. Cool. Okay, so we're closer to the end. This is the last rebuttal before my questioning of both of you, and I will do closing. So, Trevor, you're going to start this time. You're going to have 7 minutes to uninterrupted.
Yeah, sorry, I want to interrupt.
Yeah, that's fine. To refute Chris's claims with evidence. Go ahead.
What's on me?
Yep, you're going first this time.
Okay. Chris wants us to leave in saying authorship proven, but after the cross-examination, authorship assumed become later people said so. And that's not an insult, it's a category, it's reception history. They were not, whether author means direct composition of Greek text we possess, they could not escape the definition without abandoning the resolution. Then the decisive question, do any of the Gospels name the author inside the narrative? The answer is no. So the names are not coming from the inside the text, they are coming from outside the text, titles, traditions, later testimony. And here is what the Chris could not make disappear. A label can identify a book, a label cannot prove who wrote the book. Luke, the Gospel, within the preface, refuses to name the author and reframes the work as a compilation after early recounts. Matthew and Luke stand in traditional relationship with Mark, and that show editorial reuse. Matthew used Mark's gospel, even if Mark wasn't an eyewitness, but Matthew was, so why was he using Mark's gospel? Mark preserves semantic phrases and translate them for readers who need translations. These are fingerprints of transmission and compilations, text built through sources later stabilized under names. And when pressed for position, the pattern got worse. When people try to weaponize Aramaic, they often don't even keep the form straight. So what did Chris actually do tonight? He just performed confidence and for the audience really to try to assassinate my character. They tried to redefine the burden, saying that I'm the one that had the burden when he's the one that was making the claim that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote it. They tried to make the received under a name equal to written by that man. They tried to make early and anonymous equal demonstrated, but slogans don't change categories and repetition doesn't create evidence. If they want to say early communities received these texts under these names, they can say that. That is reception. But if they want to say, therefore, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John demonstrably composed these Greek texts, they owe evidence proportionate to that claim. They did not produce it. So don't let them sell you a halo and call it handwriting. Don't let them hand you a label and demand it to treat you like an audiograph. Hold to that claim that the standard it demands. If you do, the conclusion, not emotional, the resolution has not been demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. Whenever you're ready, Chris, your 7-minute begins. You're going to have to unmute, buddy. You're muted. Nope. Still muted.
There we go. Okay.
There you go. All right, go.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for everything here, Bill. You go by Bill, right? William Bill. All right.
Yeah, just Will.
Okay, Will. All right. My favorite baseball player is going to Will Clark. We have heard repeated skepticism, okay, about tradition, about bias, about internal indicators, but skepticism is not an explanation and it never has been, okay? Despite multiple opportunities, my opponent has not provided a clear timeline for when gospel names were attached, a mechanism for how attribution even occurred, an explanation for why attribution was unanimous, or a reason rival author names never existed, okay? There's no alternative model here. Without a positive alternative model, the negative position collapses into methodological doubt, which is what Trevor's doing here. He's doing methodological doubt, not historical analysis. Again, this is not historical analysis tonight that Trevor's posing. He's doing methodological doubt, all right? Well, this could, John 20 is in Greek, didn't look like John 15. So we throw out all the evidence, even though nobody's ever said that anybody but Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John has wrote this. We're just going to throw all that out. And, and he also said that, I'm making the claim. He said that in his rebuttal. I'm making the claim that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I'm not making the claim. I'm looking at the evidence and telling you that the evidence is making the claim. Okay, the evidence is making the claim. You're making the claim that they didn't write it, but there's no evidence. You're using literally no evidence. You're using one part of the historical method, which I showed you is a fallacy because there's tons. In fact, most historical documents don't have the internal authorship. So it's a fallacy. It's a complete fallacy. He said I tried to assassinate his character. I don't know where he's getting that from. I'm literally just telling him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't. So, that's just the truth. He's teaching false stuff. We got to use the historical method. So uniform attribution remains unexplained, okay? This is one of the strongest data points, and it still stands, all right? If the gospel circulated anonymously for decades and were later attributed, we would expect, right? We would expect competing names. We would expect regional variation. We would expect confusion in the manuscript tradition. And actually, he said, in order to falsify his position, if I found an early manuscript attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, well, we have plenty there. So instead, we find early, widespread, and uncontested attribution to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. No mechanism has been offered to explain how false attribution achieved universal success without any dissent at all, right? But now, in the 2020s, all of a sudden, they didn't write it because we know more than they did. Avoiding this point does not answer it, okay? Internal evidence was completely dismissed by Trevor, actually, not addressed at all. Internal evidence was treated as inadmissible rather than evaluated. He didn't evaluate any of it. But internal coherence is not self-authentication. It is falsifiability testing. If the Gospels contained anachronistic customs, incorrect geography, post-70 temple practices, cultural ignorance, then traditional authorship would be seriously undermined. We do not see that. Dismissing internal evidence entirely is not critical scholarship. It is methodological refusal, okay? Falsifiability was acknowledged by Trevor, and he said, if we find early manuscripts attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, then his case is dismissed. He's falsified. So we have that, and I'll be happy to share those in my closing statement. Okay, this is a serious historical position, must be falsifiable, and he identified what that would be. So that makes it easy. Obviously the traditional authorship wins. Now where the burden now stands, all right? Let's be clear about what remains on the table. The affirmative has presented a coherent historical model. Okay, that's me. That model explains early attribution. See, because he's saying that we're just attributing names like without any method at all. No, there's methodology, Trevor, to this. There's methodology. It's called the historical method. We use it on everything unbiasedly. Okay, and it shows me that you're a little bit biased when you don't attribute, you don't apply the historical method to Greco-Roman documents, but you do to the Bible. Okay,
that's what I did though.
That medal explains early attribution, internal coherence, and reception history. No superior alternative explanation has been defended. When one model explains the data and the other explains only why certainty is impossible, history favors the explanatory model. Okay, I'll say it again. History favors the explanatory model if you've got one that is using all the evidence, okay, and using the historical method, and the other is just, saying it's impossible to be 100% certain. Well, no crap. I mean, yeah, we know that. That's not how history works. Okay, go look at the historical method. Go read more history. Look how we come to history in the historical method. The way you're talking, you pretty much throw out all history, because the gospel history in the New Testament is some of the best documented history that we have in the world. Okay. To conclude, all right, distinguishing evidence is good scholarship. Isolating it to avoid convergence is not. At this stage, the traditional authorship of the Gospels remains the best historical explanation of the evidence before us, and it's not even close. Okay? Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, guys. So now I, the moderator, is going to debate both of you with my questions. Okay? Okay, so it doesn't seem like we have a lot of Q&A, so we'll probably skip the Q&A questions. And
sure.
For the Q&A questions, I already integrated them in here. If you guys still have questions as we go on, feel free to ask them in the chat. Make sure they're again stated like questions.
Mark got some stuff wrong about the geography.
Okay, cool. You can say that in the you could go ahead and address that in the closing statement. But here we go. Let's start here. Chris.
Yeah.
These are viewer questions, by the way.
Sure.
What is the internal method that you use?
So the internal method that I use, let me just pull it up again. My historical method notes. I'm using a historical analysis of the text content itself to test whether an authorship claim fits or fails, not to prove authorship in isolation. Okay, internal method asks, does this text behave the way we would expect if the traditionally attributed author wrote it? It is a coherence and falsifiability test, not self-authentication.
Okay. All right, now I got a series of questions for Trevor here. So Trevor, what is the official position of the Roman Catholic Church on this issue?
That they are apostolic tradition.
Okay, so the question is, what is the Roman Catholic Church official's position on who authored?
They allow like a diverse, like you don't have to believe that the gospel authors themselves took the pen in hand and wrote everything down.
Okay, but is it the Roman Catholic Church official position that these gospels are divinely inspired?
We wasn't talking about that.
Well, no, that's my question. Is the Roman Catholic Church, in your understanding, its official position that the Gospels are divinely inspired?
Yes.
Okay. And you believe it is the Roman Catholic's position that you're free to believe whether the author actually wrote them?
That's the what?
That the authors listed on the books actually wrote the books?
Because those titles came secondary. They wasn't a part of the compositions.
Okay, can you elaborate on that?
The earliest manuscripts we have, like P1, it doesn't show a copy of the title on it.
Okay, but they are divinely inspired.
Yes.
Okay. So, you and I, our faith, between you and me, we share 1,000 years of history. So, and in your one of your arguments, you did say that as a response to Chris's question, that you do rely on the church's authority and the early councils to determine a lot of these things. Can you show us from primary source whether the early councils affirmed the authority, the authors of the Gospels?
Like at the Council of Rome?
Okay, that they affirmed the authors of the Gospels?
I'm not sure what do you mean?
Well, you did say that you appealed to the early councils for these sort of answers. So I'm wondering, what are the councils that you're appealing to when you say that that they did not affirm the authors of the Gospels?
Why would that matter?
Sorry, which would you say?
Why would that matter? Like if a later council
Because
would
you
say,
appealed to it.
what?
Because you appealed to it.
When?
In your when you answered when Chris asked you what is your method to determine these sort of evidence in the early ages, you said the early councils.
I don't remember saying that. I'm sorry if I did.
Okay, so but do you believe that the councils hold your current opinion?
I don't think that was an infallible doctrine though.
What was not okay? So the do you or do you not think the early councils affirmed the authors of the gospel?
They probably did, but why would that matter?
Okay, but the church holds to that.
The church does not hold to that.
Okay, that's fine. So can you name me a church father or even modern church scholar, your church or my church, who says that
Raymond Brown.
who is it?
Raymond Brown.
Raymond Brown? Who is that?
Yeah, he's a Catholic scholar.
Okay, and can you show me where exactly he says, or you can look it up real quick, and I want the audience to hear this. Where does this scholar say that we don't actually know the authors
Hold
or
on.
the anonymous?
Hold on, let me look it up. It's loading. Hold on.
I'm gonna try to look this up too.
His name's Raymond E. Brown.
Okay.
It says in his introduction to the New Testament, he said that.
Okay, so can you show us a quote that he officially, in his name, affirmed the fact that he believes, okay, scholarly, that the authors are not who they said they were?
In his introduction to the New Testament, he said originally circulated anonymously that the present titles were later added by the church's tradition.
Okay, the question is, does he say that the church's position or his position or the traditions say that, because whether they were added later on or not is not the deal here. The deal is whether the church and the early Christians believe those were the authentic authors. Does he make a statement on that?
Yes, he does.
Okay, can you show us the statement?
Just give me a second.
They misquote Raymond Brown all the time.
What is
Hey,
it?
if you want, Chris, you can look at it too. You can look up.
Yeah, no, I am. I know this argument. They overplay
It's
their
fine.
hand on this
So
one.
it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. We're not let Trevor answer.
Yeah, sorry. Yep.
Well, y'all can answer too. I mean, I don't really.
No. No, no, it's your time, Trevor. This is the question to you. It's all good, brother. It's all love, man.
So what was your original question again?
The original question is, does the scholar Raymond Brown state that it is the church's position, or the early Christians' position, that the Gospels are actually anonymous? The question is not asking whether Raymond Brown said it was added later or not. If you can't find it, that's okay. We can move on.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
No, he does not teach that the Gospels are anonymous. Like the church does not teach
Okay,
that.
that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So with that said, when I asked you a few minutes ago that whether you believe the early councils and early fathers affirmed the authors, you said yes, but you don't think those are official. But then you went and quote Raymond Brown, who does not have, who also don't have official position, which you believe, but you believe will support you. So do you not see that there is a double standard there in your
How?
use of sources? Because we went to the early councils, which are more authoritative than a later scholar, and you said the early council is not authoritative, but then you went to a scholar who is also not authoritative. That's why, like, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah.
It's just something for you to think about. Okay.
Mhm.
What exactly about Chris's historical method that he has been appealing to do you disagree with?
His late he puts too much emphasis on the later traditions that come about.
Okay, the councils are lighter traditions in your belief?
He didn't appeal to the councils though. He appealed to Papias and Irenaeus.
Okay, okay, cool.
I mean, it was more than that. It wasn't just all the external tradition. 100% of it affirms what
Okay,
the gospel authorship.
the Council of Carthage that affirms certain gospel books, is that authoritative to you?
Not for authorship.
Okay, so what about the Seventh Ecumenical Council?
Did they ever claim dogmatically that who wrote
They
them?
claim dogmatically, but they affirm the use of the text.
So it wasn't dogmatic.
No,
So why
on
would
its own it's not, but the council unilaterally affirmed the uses of the text.
but they're not teaching it for every Christian to believe though, right?
It is in the sense of an ecumenical council. The question is not that, like, whether it's correct or not. The question is, do you believe a council like that having those statements or doing those things are authoritative in that context?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. Why isn't this is the last question for you, man? Why is it not enough to determine the author's identity through the consistency of the Gospels and the
Of
internal
the Gospels.
sources?
What do you mean consistency of the Gospels?
Can you repeat that?
What do you mean the consistency of the Gospels?
The consistency of the stories?
Because it was fixed early at like at least 120. Papias
The
said that it
Gospels were altered?
was authored by someone,
You believe the Gospels were altered?
not altered, but I think that not corrupt, but I think that redaction criticism had showed a lot, like it had a lot to do with it.
Okay, and okay,
It's not on.
you are. I'm assuming you're Latin, right? Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Trevor. That's all the question I got for you. Chris, here's your turn.
All right.
My question is, I'm going to actually start out with the question one of the guys asked. Why do the earliest gospel manuscripts lack author names, and why do the attributions only appear decades later after church authority structures were established?
Yeah, sure. So the historical method, when we look at the earliest, are you talking about the earliest manuscripts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the earliest manuscripts don't have to have the authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let me see here. I had something that I wrote here. Let me see where it is here. Hold on one second. Yeah, here we go. I had this written. So the earliest gospel manuscripts that preserve titles already contain author attribution. So those manuscripts, they already had and contain author attributions, and they are also uniform. So the documents, the manuscripts do more to prove gospel authorships, but we don't need to see the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in those particular things. That was another fallacy that Trevor brought up. Not every manuscript has a title preserved, but everyone that does is attributed and never differently. So, for example, every manuscript that we have was never attributed to an anonymous person. They all were attributed to the said authors. Okay, why is that? Let's think about that.
P1 does it.
Okay.
Because the historical method, because everybody at that time knew that they were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's never been a dispute.
Okay.
So we don't need to see it, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John on these early.
What's your sources for that?
Made it up.
So my sources for what again?
Your sources for saying that nobody ever disputed it.
Well, it's not a source, but I mean, who did dispute it? I mean, I can't prove a double negative, but nobody ever disputed that these were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If there was.
Cool. How do you know the authenticity of those gospels then?
The authenticity of the gospels?
Mm-hmm.
When you say authenticity, what do you mean exactly?
How do you prove that they were actually written by the apostles, not later?
Sure.
Like Trevor said in his answering, he said they were all. How do you know that they were?
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah, thanks. So again, I'm going to keep going back to the same argument I have. There's a historical method that we use to prove authorship, historical authorship. That's what I use. And so it's not a matter of, you don't have to prove something 100%. Mm-hmm. That's not how history works. So what you do is you take the evidence that you have and you evaluate it through the historical method. And if you want, I can go through that. External. So would you like me to go through the historical method?
Okay.
How about you look at what year did Matthew?
Trevor, I got this. Okay. So you appeal to historical method, but the church fathers, are they would be a part of that historical method? Yes.
Oh yeah, a big part. Yeah. And there's something I didn't even mention, but I'll go ahead and ask your question to see if this comes up.
Okay. But before we go on to my next question,
I think I know where you're going. Sorry, I think I know where you're going. I didn't. Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask you another question.
Yeah. Sure.
Now, do you believe it is possible of what Trevor's saying that is true, that the Gospels can be inspired, but the authors are not who they say they are?
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you can have an inspired Gospels without Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John being who wrote it. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, you do appeal to church fathers?
I do.
Okay, now what is your standard for doing that? And how do you prove the reliability of the fathers you quoted when you don't accept their authority?
Well, see, that's a misunderstanding a lot of people have about me. I know I get labeled as a Protestant a lot. I affirm early church tradition. It's only later Catholic tradition that I start to come to question.
How is it not pick and choosing when you constantly choose? Okay, well, I like these tradition, and I don't not going to take it.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So the way, see, now we're getting off the historical and we're getting into theology. So I just wanted to.
We're not necessarily getting into theology. I'm just asking your
Sure. So am I allowed to answer this theologically, or would you like to me answer this?
I'll tell you why I asked this question. Okay.
Sure.
Because Trevor did, in his opinion, in my questioning of him, he appealed to later traditions of the church.
Yeah.
Now you're quoting early traditions, so I'm asking, what is your standard to judge which one is wrong?
Okay. Okay, so in the historical method, one of the things we use, and this is really strong, and I didn't even bring this up, there is a chain of apostolic authorship here, it's very strong, and it survives the historical method extremely well. So I would say the chain of apostolic authorship gives me, in the church tradition is why it's a home run for gospel authorship. I think that's the question you're asking, right?
Okay, and Trevor, do you believe that it is currently, at this moment, the Roman Catholic Church's official position that the Gospels are anonymous?
They don't have an official position.
So there's no official position. Okay, so if there is anything that you can appeal to in the Roman Catholic dogma or anything official that can, that you believe that would strongly support your opinion, what would it be?
What do you mean? Like,
good questions. Yeah.
Well, if you have anything, from the Roman Catholic Church that would support either nowadays or back in the days that you believe that you can quote to support your position that the Gospels are anonymous, what would it be?
Probably the doctors of the church.
Okay, what does it say about the authorship of the Bible? Or excuse me, the Gospels?
Let's think on that.
Okay. Here, Chris, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Assuming that Trevor has reasons to believe that his church, the Roman Catholic Church, support loosely or somehow officially support the idea that the Gospels are anonymous. Okay. And in his version of, when we appeal to history, he can actually appeal to his tradition that is the case. So what would you respond to that? Because if he's appealing to his tradition, you're appealing to church tradition, why is his method wrong? Because you've been criticizing his method.
Yeah, right. His method, does he appeal to tradition at all? Really? I mean, all he does is raise doubt on it.
Yes, I do.
I didn't hear any tradition. What tradition did he use to from his position?
Clement of Rome and Justin Martyr.
Can you show? Yeah, can you go ahead and show us that whatever you believe from those fathers that support your position?
Yeah. Sorry, I missed that, brother. I totally apologize. I missed that. Yeah, please.
Justin Martyr today was from the Memoirs of the Apostles, and Clement of Rome didn't say anything.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, would you like me to answer that?
No. So
okay.
That's fine. All right. I mean, I guess this is all the question I have for you guys. And go ahead with your. We're gonna do closing now.
Okay.
It's interesting because tomorrow on the Julian calendar here, that we actually we're celebrating one of the feasts of St. John Chrysostom. So I got to go to midnight liturgy after this.
Nice.
Anyways, who wants to go first? You know what? We'll have Chris. You go first, and we'll give Trevor the last one.
Okay, sure. All right. Give me 1 second here. A nice closing rebuttal that I just typed up. 1 second. Thanks for that. That was great. Hold on 1 second. Bro. There we go.
Actually, while you're doing that,
I got it. Oh no, can I go?
I'm gonna do this. Let's do this.
Okay.
So, Chris, why don't you spend a minute and steelman Trevor's position?
Okay, sure. That should be fun. Trevor's position is that we don't know who wrote the Gospels because they didn't say inside the text itself that they were written. This was his biggest piece of evidence. And he also said that the church fathers don't know what they're talking about, and they had too long of a time in between gospel authorship to know what they were talking about. So we just throw them out as well. He also argued that let's see here. I mean, it wasn't too much stuff. He was just pretty much, I believe, his argument was an argument of, I doubt that they were the authors because of this or that. He didn't really have a methodology. I didn't really think he had a tradition to appeal to.
Yeah, just the steelman of what do you think he's arguing?
Yeah. Okay. So he's basically arguing that, and I'll finish this quick. He's basically arguing that the Gospels are anonymous because they don't inside the text themselves say that that they are written by I Matthew, I Mark, I Luke, I John, and he just I think that's his argument. I don't know really what method he uses here, but that's pretty much it.
Okay, Trevor, do you think Chris's steelman of your argument is accurate?
No.
Okay, well then tell us, what is your argument tonight?
That the Gospels themselves they don't. That should be the biggest piece of evidence and data we have, is if the Gospels themselves preserve who wrote it. It doesn't matter what someone else come along and would say it about them. Should it? I mean, not to me. I don't think it should. I mean, but it could for yours. I mean, you can do that.
Okay, cool. Can you give us a steelman of what you think Chris is arguing for tonight?
That the texts themselves don't have authorship, which he said that they was anonymous, but he appeals to later traditions in order to gin up enough scenarios in order to prove it.
Cool. Thank you. Chris, do you think Trevor's steelman of your argument is accurate?
Not even close.
Okay.
Not even close.
Yeah. That's fine. All right. Whenever you're ready, Chris, go ahead with your closing.
Okay. All right. So thank you. Thank you, Will. It's been great. Now, as we close, the question is not whether doubts can be raised. Is kind of Trevor's been raising some doubts. Doubts can always be raised, as I've said time and time again. The real question is whether the negative burden has been met. And what did I say at the beginning? His burden has not been met. Okay. The debate was never about certainty, inspiration, or theology. Okay. It was about historical authorship and methodological consistency. Okay. He didn't have a method. All right. There was no consistency in my opponent's argument. The affirmative's burden was modest to show, it was easy really, to show that the traditional authorship of the Gospels is the most historically plausible explanation of the evidence. Okay, excuse me, that was my burden was easy to show that the traditional authorship of the Gospels is the most historically plausible explanation of the evidence. The negative's burden was greater to provide a superior alternative explanation, not merely skepticism. Okay, what I established today, over the course of the debate, we established that ancient works normally do not contain modern style author signatures. Okay, authorship in antiquity is established through external attestation and internal coherence. This is the same method used for Greco-Roman historians. The Gospels have early, uniform, and uncontested attribution. There are no rival author traditions, none, zero. You would think that if there was, if these were just anonymous, that there would be other rival authors that were used. We don't find any. Internal evidence coheres with early first century composition. None of these points were overturned. Okay, what the negative did not establish, what Trevor did not establish. Despite multiple opportunities, he did not provide a clear timeline for when gospel names were attached, a mechanism explaining how attribution occurred, an explanation for why attribution was anonymous, a reason rival author names never existed, or a falsifiable alternative model. Instead, we heard repeated appeals to uncertainty. Oh, this makes it uncertain. That makes it uncertain. John 20 makes it uncertain. But uncertainty is not a historical explanation. It's not how history works. The method, I can't say this word. The methodological issue remains decisive. If eternal attestation is dismissed here, it must be dismissed everywhere. We can't be inconsistent here, guys. Okay, we can't just do special pleading. This for the Gospels and everything else. No, we don't use the historical method. So if internal coherence is inadmissible here, it must be inadmissible everywhere. But if we apply consistent historical standards, then the conclusion does not disappear. It clarifies. The traditional authorship of the Gospels fits the data better than any alternative presented. And in history, that's a home run, all right? And it's not even close, really. There's no secondary model of gospel authorship. Okay, falsifiability does matter. Okay, this is a truth test. This is a truth filter in anybody's historical explanation about anything. Falsifiability matters. A responsible historical position must be falsifiable, meaning, if I find thus and such, then I will recant what I said, and this could be true. We explained what would weaken our case, okay? Competing early attributions, conflicting manuscript titles, internal anachronisms, and early denials of authorship. None of these exist. By contrast, the negative position offered no clear criteria for confirmation, only permanent doubt. That is not history. That is philosophical skepticism. That's not what we're doing here today. Okay, this is a historical method test. This is a historical debate based on a historical method, okay? And I'm going to kind of compare our models a little bit, Trevor, finally here. At the end of a historical inquiry, we compare explanations, all right? So let's compare yours and let's compare mine. One model explains early attribution, explains manuscript evidence, explains internal coherence and reception history. The other explains why certainty is impossible. Well, yeah, of course it is. The only thing that's certain is death, taxes, and that my mother loves me. Okay, so nothing is certain, but that's not how history works. All right, we get the best evidence and we apply it, and it's worked pretty good. This is what science is. Okay, history favors explanatory power, not perpetual hesitation. All right, distinguishing evidence is good scholarship. Isolating it to avoid convergence is not good scholarship, my friend Trevor. On the evidence presented tonight, the traditional authorship of the Gospels remains the best historical explanation of the data. Okay, thank you. And I didn't even get into gospel, chains. The gospel chains. I mean, that right there is like the biggest evidence I can use. I didn't even use it. I didn't need to, because I know you wouldn't have. Anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Trevor, go ahead with your closing statement.
Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. It's my first debate here. I was really nervous. I've been up for a few days. I haven't been able to sleep, and it's 11 o'clock here. But I forgot to say that Matthew and Mark, they would have died in 68 AD. So how could they have wrote them? Did they come back from the dead and write them?
They could argue early authorship.
What?
So we could argue.
Okay,
go ahead.
Chris,
I know.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Well, in the Gospels themselves, they present themselves to being past 70 AD because the Jerusalem temple had failed. You knew that's why scholars date it to 70 AD, right? It's because the Jerusalem temple had already failed. If you claim written by, showing the writing. If you claim authored by, show the author. If you want signature level certainty, bring signature level evidence. You gave traditions, you gave titles, you gave later testimony, you gave confidence. But confidence is not evidence, tradition is not signature, and title is a label, not a fingerprint. Reception is not composition. Attribution is not authorship. According to is not written by. Tonight, when asked for authorship proof, you kept handing It was early. I mean, it was unanimous. It was widespread. The church received. Papias said something, and Irenaeus said it. Those may be meaningful as reception history, but none of them is an audiograph. None of them is an eternal, authoritative self-identification. None of them is none of them was written during the time that they would have lived at the same time. Meanwhile, the texts themselves kept saying the same thing. No eternal author names, a compiler's preface with no name, text viewed from text, Semitic phrases translated for outsiders. That's not signed memoirs look like. That's just what an anonymous tradition shaped into gospel, Greek narratives, later stabilized under names looks like. Now look at the final point the audience deserves to hear plainly. The Chris quietly changes the meaning of authored to associate it with, to connect it to. They are conceding the resolution while hoping you don't notice, because the connection is not composition. Association is not authorship, and a halo around a label does not turn it into a signature. Just learn to Google confidently and think critically. I'm done.
All righty. Curtis, you
All right.
can mute there. So again, thank you both for coming. I think that was
Yeah.
definitely an
Thanks,
interesting.
Will.
Yeah, anytime.
You're a great moderator, bro. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you
Well,
moderating, and
well,
I'd like to do more of these, man.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're both welcome. If you got a debate, you need somebody to
Yeah.
moderate. Happy to do
Yeah.
that for you guys.
Yeah.
I
And
usually am
Trevor.
not the guy who ever asks questions in
Yeah.
the debates, man. This is Oxford style, so I got to come up with stuff.
Yeah. No, you were very fair, bro, and you did great. And Trevor, man, no ill feelings, brother. I love you, man. You know that. And I just wanted to get out here in the open and debate instead of in a little internet room. You know how it is, man. Typing and stuff like that. We can't get a good debate. This was great for us, and I'm glad it was your first debate, Trevor. And also, I apologize that you've been up for 2 days, man. If there's anything you need to talk to personally, you can always hit me up, bro. I'm your brother still. I just wanted to, discuss this with you. I don't have any ill wills towards you at all, bro. So I just want you to know that. I love you, man. And, if you ever need me, I'm here, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah.
It's not like, because we disagree, we got to hate each other. It's not Christian brotherly love, bro. I mean, this is actually brotherly love that I took you on here, to be honest with you. And I'm sure it's brotherly love that you, trying to explain to me too. So yeah, let's remember that, man. Not an assassination character at all. You're a good guy, man. I just want to say that to you, so you know that. All right.
All righty, guys. So again, debates are debates. Everybody's got opposing opinions. It's natural. Humans. All right. He could be right. He could be right. Who knows? And again, our job here is done. My job here as the moderator is make sure the debate is fair. I question you equally, and we got the rules settled. Good job to both of you. That was your first time, Trevor. I think you handled yourself pretty well. Now, I guess, we've done our job. We just leave it up to the audience who's going to see this to decide. Okay, we debating, we moderating. We don't decide who wins the debate. My side is going to say my side win. Okay, that's just how it is, right? But what's important is that we're all honest about the information we present so that the people who are actually interested in hearing the arguments, they're the ones that are going to decide, because most people are here just pretty much saying my side win, right? Mm-hmm. So that I hope we provided that, and thank you both for coming, and have a great night. God bless.
Thanks, brother. All right, man. All right, take care, guys. Yep.
Hey, Chris, can I talk to you after this?
Yeah, for sure, brother. Yeah. You want to talk here? You want to talk on Messenger?
Right here, it don't matter.
Yeah.
You guys need a minute? All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Yeah. Let's talk.
So what do you think about Matthew dying before 70 AD?
Well, I have an earlier gospel authorship than most. So
what? How do you do that? It's based on like the Jerusalem temple being destroyed.
Right. So critically looking at these, you probably heard of the Magdalena papyrus, which I know there's dissenting opinions on it, but there are scholars that say that is contemporaneous with Matthew, actually, that it's actually a firsthand copy. And also, you would think that you would see the late. I know you kind of go with the later authorship, and I go with the earlier. And one of the reasons is because like you see a lot of big like dates in Christian history that aren't mentioned in the Gospels that would tell me that they were written a little bit earlier. Now, you had mentioned this, the temple, sure, that's one of them, but there's other ones too. You know, Paul's imprisonment or Peter's imprisonment. There's a few I've written down. There's a few markers you would expect to find in the Gospels that you don't, which tells me that authorship was most probably earlier than they think. You know,
We got
and
some
you know,
criticism of that.
yeah. How
Other sources,
say I'm sorry, you cut off for a second.
like scholars that say that Mark, like there's a pre-Mark and passion narrative that the gospel, I mean the author Mark used, that dates to 30 AD, that dates the crucifixion for us. So that's why we would see stuff like that.
Well, you know, a lot of the authorship, I've told you this like privately, a lot of the scholarship that you're listening to, and that's why as your brother, I want to try to give you just the alternate view. That's really what I am, brother. I'm just an alternate view, you know. I'm an alternate view of what you're reading and what you're listening to. I think they start with the presupposition that the Gospels cannot be inspired, and they must be wrong in some cases. And so I think a lot of times bias plays a big role in the way they date these things and things like that. So, you know, that's why you know, it's funny because you would think I'd be the one to appealing to, you know, divine authority and all that, but I'm the one that wants to keep it in the historical tradition because I want to prove to people that it holds up very, very well.
Tradition doesn't make it true though.
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up. When we look at any history, we don't just look at arbitrary things. We actually have a method we go by scientifically, as I'm sure you know. Well, if you don't know, you know now because you talk to me. So it's not just one thing, Trevor. It's a lot of things. It's 5 things, right? So you have, you know, the internal. You also have the external sources. Okay,
But
and what you do.
How much does it weigh, like for something like the external? How much does it weigh?
Well, it depends. It depends. You know, I think on the Gospels it weighs heavily, and it's funny. You know, the last time we argued this, and I know you're a Roman Catholic, but I was the one defending the Church Fathers. You know what I mean? Because the early Church Fathers are huge to me with the Gospels. I'm going to tell you why. We actually have an actual chain of apostolic succession. I can't talk.
Oh.
That chain, my man, I don't know if you can argue it, man. It's huge. It's huge. And I hear you, like, you know, did this guy, teach this guy? Did he teach that guy? But I mean, you tend to appeal to just doubt. How do we know that he did it? You're looking for 100% certainty, my friend. We're never going to get that. All we can do, Trevor, is get the evidence that we have, and we try to use it to the best of our ability through the 5 steps in the historical method, and then we see what comes out. You know, it's like a filter. And so that's how I use it. Completely unbiased.
I feel like you're completely unbiased.
Yeah. I try to be unbiased. Yeah, that's right.
I don't think humans can be unbiased.
Well, no. We can't be. Good point, brother. We can't. You know that. We talked about that. And I told you that actually before. You're right. Humans cannot be unbiased. So that's why we need these filters, brother. That's why we need these filters. So you discipline me and I'll discipline you. When I think you're being biased, I got to call you out. And that's why you think I know you think that sometimes I'm like coming at you hard, bro. But you know, I love you, man. I mean, I've loved you ever since I met you. You've been one of my best friends in the room, as you know. You know, since we're going to get real with each other, I just think sometimes you're teaching false things. And so as your brother in Christ, and it's my Christian duty to try to correct you, you know, and that's all it is.
I don't feel like they're wrong things though.
Well, exactly. I know you don't, bro. That's why you argue so hard, you know? Exactly.
I used to believe the same thing that you would. I used to be I would used to think the same things you did, but my mind has changed.
Yeah, I know it has. I think that what would you say that changed your mind on a lot of this stuff? Would you just go to school? Was it seminary school? What do you think it was?
Getting more data.
Okay. Now I'm going to be honest with you again, since that's all we can do is be honest, brother. And you can be honest with me. Don't worry, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I do think that you have a bias against the Bible. Pretty heavy bias actually against the Bible, and I'll tell you why. Because you take every stance that is the absolute opposite stance of what would make the Bible reliable. So if I saw that 7 out of 10 times, 6 out of 10 times, I might say, okay, hey, that's cool. Sometimes he goes for that, sometimes he goes for this, but it's almost 100% of the time, Trevor. So what that tells me is you're biasly taking the other side because something about the Bible is bothering you, you know. And so that's my honest take on you. My other honest take on you is you're brilliant. You're probably a lot smarter than I am, to be honest. Now, I don't know if I can be honest with you here because we talked some privately, but you said you were a little afraid in public speaking and stuff like that. I think you did great, actually. I think you slowed down. I think you were cool. I think you were calm. I apologize for jumping in. You know how I can get sometimes. I'm not following the rules, but Will's good at moderating. But no, I think you did great, bro. And I push you to debate. I want you to debate. You're a very smart guy. You're probably smarter than I am. You know.
But I don't really think debates change anything. This is just for play, I think.
Say again.
I think this is just for play. This doesn't change anything.
As far as the debate.
What?
Well, I'm sorry. What doesn't change anything?
Like this doesn't change anything.
What's this? I'm sorry, I'm missing what this is.
I feel like it's just a play.
What's a play?
Debates and stuff like public.
Oh, debates and stuff. I got you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't know what you meant debates. Well, you know, I'm gonna start a video series, bro, and I know you watch my videos. I appreciate that. I'm gonna start a video series on proving Christianity. I'm going to attempt to prove Christianity beyond a reasonable doubt, like a courtroom lawyer. And I think debates do help, actually. Now, what unfortunately happens is we're so biased and people are hard-headed. And, you know, the Bible talks about that. The Bible talks about hardness of people's hearts, you know, and that's why we believe only God can change people's hearts. But what you say is true. I mean, psychology that I've studied even says what you said. Humans are biased. Humans don't go with the truth or the facts. And then what they do is they go the side they want to go with, and then they justify it later with the facts. So you're actually right there. So sometimes debates don't do anything, but we've got to change them, brother. We got to change people's minds. You know, we've got to get people to see what filters can we use to get to truth. And that's what I'd like to embark on with you, man. You know, me and you together, since we're on opposite sides, me and you can come together and we can just, you know, set some ground rules and we can filter out truths and we'll see what comes out the other side. If you're down, I am, man. And if your side is right, then you'll bring me over to your side. If my side is the truth, that's not my side, right?
You said that the Gospels couldn't be inspired unless they were written by the people that said they wrote them.
Yeah, I do believe that. Yeah. Do you know why I believe that?
Because
here's why I believe that. And you may disagree. And listen, I may be wrong about that. He only asked what I believed, right? And I have some serious beliefs about the Bible that we haven't even got into today that have nothing to do with history, by the way. It has to do with divine inspiration. Okay, we didn't get into that today. But no, I believe that if God inspired the Bibles, that you're not going to see false attribution of authors. That if God inspired it, he's powerful enough. We got to admit, God is powerful enough. Our God. And we're not talking about the Muslim God. We're not talking about, you know, Hindu God. We're talking about the God, right? The God of the universe that created all of us. That God is powerful enough to be able to attribute the authors correctly. That's what I believe. So,
but
would you disagree with that?
Yes, I would, because there's a lot of false attributions.
Like
First and Second Timothy and Titus.
Mm-hmm. What would you say about them?
They say Paul wrote them and Paul didn't write them because the theology of the church has been developed too much at that point.
Okay, no problem. So you say that Paul didn't write First and Second Timothy,
and Titus.
And Titus. Okay, so what I would say to you is, so that we don't have our bias, and me too, I'm biased the other way. I would say he did write it, right? So I got to even check myself. So what truth filters are we going to use and put that through to see if that's a good claim based on evidence or a claim just based on some scholar said?
I think a good choice, like the styles of the Greek language in it, I think that would be a good starting point.
Okay. So you're talking about the style of the Greek lettering. Okay, good. The truth filter that I would use on that is I would first define what truth is, actually. Define what logic is, right? What's his name? What's the Greek author that defined truth? And I would actually kind of build from there. And then I would, I developed 8 laws, like the law of non-contradiction. You know, there's a bunch of laws that you can look at and you put something through to see if it actually can be filtered as a truth claim. And so that's interesting. So what evidence do you base that on? First and Second Timothy that's not built based on Paul. Did you say the Greek?
The Greek language, like the style,
Greek language.
The theology of the church at that point. And,
okay. Let me ask you a question. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate here on a lot of your stuff. Now, do you agree that the apostles were men of truth?
Yes.
I know you do. I know you do. And you're a big Jesus guy too. I appreciate that. So when you say these things are false, I think what you're saying is sometimes, remember, the apostles were around when these things were being written, and then they were the ones that started the church, and then they handed their traditions out. So what we're saying is whoever received the traditions of the church, of the apostles, the holy apostles that are inspired by the Holy Spirit, they somehow got it wrong. I mean, if we can't trust apostolic tradition, what can we really trust, right? So that's, I think, what William was getting at too. And he's right. And I know he wanted to get me on that question because you guys say I'm a Protestant, right? And so why is Chris appealing to church tradition? You got to appeal to church tradition. I will appeal to church tradition, absolutely.
I'm appealing the Bible alone.
Yeah, no. See, Bible alone doesn't mean that, but that's okay. But no, you're right. I can't. How can I? I mean, the church put together the Bible. How can I appeal to the Bible alone? No. The apostles are very important in this whole thing, and they started the church. So the church tradition is very important in authenticating the Bible. I don't know if you knew I had that stance, but I do. And, it's one that I developed. I didn't always have it, but you know what I do, bro? I take things to its logical conclusion. Okay, and the logical conclusion of the Holy Bible is you can't authenticate it without understanding that the apostles are who they said they were, and they have a tradition specifically for those written documents. And you know what? I'm sorry I'm talking so much, bro. I feel like I'm talking and you're listening. You can talk too. But one thing I love about the apostles, when I'm talking to Muslims too and everybody else, is we can say that the apostles were they don't lie. And the reason we can say that is because they all martyred themselves. They all martyred themselves for this truth. Martyrs, so that that they martyred themselves, I'd have to look it up actually. I'd have to look. Oh, you don't believe they martyred? They
I mean, Matthew would have died in 68 AD.
Okay. So you don't believe the apostles martyred themselves?
Oh, I believe it. I just don't think I don't think the tradition of it is reliable to base it on like that.
Okay. But you do believe it. Do you believe that Stephen was stoned to death in front of Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty tough one. I'm happy to hear you say that. So, so the apostles have shown themselves to be, to believe in this truth so much that they're willing to give their life for it. That to me is a big thing. And so what we can deduce from that is that the apostles, it's not that it's the truth, but it's that they believe it's the truth. So they don't lie. They tell truth. Martyrdom, the way they did it, peaceful martyrdom without fighting back, tells me that they tell the truth. And that is a big time, I think, historical marker for the traditional authorship of the Gospels, because these people aren't going to lie. They're not going to lie about who wrote it. Their disciples aren't going to lie about who wrote it. So I think that's a big historical marker right there to prove authorship. These people are not people that lie. It's not like we're Muslims and we have weak hadiths, right? And we have strong hadiths. We have liars in our chains. No, we don't have that with the church, man. We have nothing but solid people, especially in the early church. So what do you think about that?
Hold on. What was your last part that you said?
So I was just saying that because the apostles martyred themselves, it makes them so truthful and reliable with what they say that
who said that who they got martyred?
Well, we even established that, you and me both believe that Stephen got martyred, for example, right? So Stephen died for what he believed in. We know Jesus died for what he believed in. So I mean, who do you dispute died for that martyred themselves? Is there any dispute that you have about that? Because usually people don't lie about that, Trevor, and I'll tell you why. It's one of those. It's a law of embarrassment. I don't think it's a glorious thing really to get killed.
You ever had Heaven's Gates before? Remember Heaven's Gate?
No, huh? Tell me about it.
Where people thought that the UFO was going to come get them, and they killed themselves.
I think I remember that. Yeah, was that in either Texas or it was in
It was all in the United States, I think.
Yeah. I do remember that, and they killed themselves, right? Yeah. So what you're going to say that? Well, so here's what I'll say about that, though. To my point. Okay. Again, I'm not saying that it proves that they're right, but it proves that they believe what they said. That's all I'm trying to establish here. They believe what they said, meaning they're not lying. So unfortunately, those people that died in that UFO whatever thing, they believed it enough to die for it. So we can say that they believed in what they did. And so that's all I'm trying to establish. The apostles believed the Gospels were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They believed that if they passed down their traditions, that it would get transmitted perfectly. And we see that. We see that with the documents. We see that that it has been transmitted very well. But anyways, brother, my wife's calling. I got to go. Dude, thank you, bro, for spending this time with me. I appreciate you, man. I think that was a good debate. What do you think?
I don't know.
No, it was good, bro. It was good. I think you'll be better next time. I think I'll be better next time. You know what? This is my first debate too, actually, ever like
Really?
this. Yes,
I didn't
my
like the
first
format,
debate
though.
ever. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. We can do another format. I know. I thought William was very fair, and you know, he trust me. I would try to get in on your time, and he would just cut me off, man. So that's what you need. You need strict rules, and yeah. No, I think you did fine, bro. I just think that, you know, between you and me, I think your position's wrong, and I think it is a false teaching, and I would just love for you to just really look at the evidence. But I love you like a brother, and I'm gonna keep trying to give you truth, man. You know.
And I would ask you to look at my evidence too.
Of course, yeah, I will. I always look at the evidence, and if I don't, call me out on it. If I don't ever look at something, you call me out on it. And then the point of discussing it with brothers, because even in the Bible it said we must rebuke each other, like it's our brotherly duty, right? So when we look at the evidence, you know, all I ask you to do is to look at things with an open mind and not just stick to a point. And I'll try to do the same. Fair
Okay.
enough, my brother. All right, man. Well, hey, you take care, brother.
All right. See you.
Man, see you later, Trev. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
All right, bro.